There's a question spreading quietly through technology forums, consumer advocacy groups, and enterprise boardrooms alike. And it is a question that touches something fundamental about how people relate to the software they depend on every day. Is Windows becoming a subscription? Not all at once. Not through a single announcement that would generate immediate and focused resistance, but gradually, incrementally, through a series of decisions that individually seem reasonable and collectively point in a direction that many users find deeply uncomfortable. Microsoft has not declared that Windows 11 will require a monthly payment to operate. That is an important fact, and this discussion will honor it. But the honest examination of where Windows is heading, the services being layered onto it, the features being placed behind paywalls, the account requirements being introduced, the AI capabilities being monetized, raises legitimate questions about what personal computing will look like 5 or 10 years from now. For decades, buying a computer meant buying software you owned. You paid once, it worked. It continued working until you chose to upgrade. That relationship between user and software was simple, predictable, and transparent. Something about that relationship is changing, and the people who notice it deserve a serious, grounded explanation of what is actually happening and why. The history of how Windows was sold is inseparable from the history of how the personal computer industry built its commercial foundation. When Microsoft released early versions of Windows in the 1980s and into the 1990s, the model was uncomplicated by today's standards. Software was a product. You purchased it, you received physical media, initially floppy disks, later compact disks, and you installed it on your machine. The license you acquired was perpetual. Microsoft received your money once, and in exchange, you received the right to use that version of the software indefinitely. There was no ongoing financial relationship between you and Microsoft after the transaction was complete. Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7. Each of these was a discrete product with a retail price, a box on a store shelf, and a license that belonged to the person who purchased it. Upgrades were optional. If Windows XP worked for your needs, you were under no commercial pressure to purchase Windows Vista. Many users, in fact, made exactly that calculation and declined to upgrade, a decision that was entirely within their rights and cost them nothing. The OEM channel complicated this picture somewhat. When you purchased a computer from Dell or HP or Lenovo, the Windows license was bundled into the price of the hardware. You did not see it as a separate line item, but it was there, a licensing fee paid by the manufacturer to Microsoft for each unit shipped. This OEM model made Windows feel even more like a natural feature of the hardware rather than a separate purchase, further reinforcing the sense that Windows was simply something you owned as part of owning a computer. Enterprise licensing operated through volume agreements. Companies purchased licenses for their entire fleets, often through multi-year agreements with Microsoft. But even here, the fundamental model was a payment in exchange for the right to use a specific version of software for an agreed period. Windows 7, released in 2009, became perhaps the most beloved version of Windows in commercial history precisely because it exemplified everything users valued in that traditional model. It was stable, compatible, fast on the hardware of its era, and thoroughly capable. When Microsoft eventually ended support for Windows 7 in January 2020, the resistance from users and businesses was significant. Many organizations paid Microsoft for extended security updates rather than transition to a newer version, a telling indicator of how deeply attached users became to software they felt they genuinely owned. Windows 10 introduced the first significant structural departure from that tradition. Microsoft offered Windows 10 as a free upgrade to existing Windows 7 and Windows 8 users during the first year of its availability. This was a remarkable commercial decision. The company was, in effect, walking away from the upgrade revenue that had historically been a meaningful component of its consumer business. The logic behind that decision was not generosity. It was strategic repositioning. Microsoft was beginning to understand that the value of Windows was not primarily in the license fee itself, but in the platform that license fee secured, the installed base of users who would then use Microsoft's cloud services, productivity subscriptions, and digital storefronts. Windows as a product was becoming Windows as a platform, and platforms are worth more when they are larger. Windows 11, released in 2021, was offered as a free upgrade to eligible Windows 10 devices. The perpetual license model survived. But the world around that license was changing substantially. To understand the current moment, it is essential to distinguish between two things that are often conflated in public discussion: Windows itself and the ecosystem of paid services that Microsoft has built around Windows. Windows 11 as an operating system remains available as a perpetual license. OEM devices ship with Windows pre-installed, the cost embedded in the hardware price. Standalone retail licenses can be purchased outright. Microsoft has not announced plans to convert the base Windows license into a subscription product for consumers. This is a factual baseline that any serious analysis must establish clearly. What has changed, and what is continuing to change with increasing momentum, is the layer of services, features, and capabilities that surround Windows and that carry their own pricing structures. Microsoft 365 is the most significant of these. The rebrand of Office 365 into Microsoft 365 was not merely cosmetic. It signaled a philosophical transformation of how Microsoft conceives of its productivity software. The applications that once came on a disk, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, are now delivered primarily as a subscription service. Microsoft 365, personal costs a monthly or annual fee. Microsoft 365, family extends that to multiple users. The subscription includes access to the applications, 1 terabyte of OneDrive cloud storage per user, and various AI-powered features. The standalone version of Office, now branded as Office 2024, remains available as a one-time purchase, but it lacks the cloud features, the continuous updates, and increasingly, the AI capabilities that Microsoft is building into the subscription version. The standalone product exists, but Microsoft's commercial and marketing emphasis is unambiguously on the subscription. OneDrive illustrates the cloud dependency question. Windows 11's setup process actively encourages users to sign in with a Microsoft account and configure OneDrive synchronization. The integration between Windows 11 and OneDrive is seamless and genuinely useful for many users, but the storage beyond 5 gigabytes requires a paid subscription. As document sizes grow, as photo libraries expand, and as the expectation that files are available across all devices becomes standard, the free storage tier becomes increasingly inadequate for real-world use, by design or otherwise. Copilot represents Microsoft's most ambitious and commercially significant addition to the Windows environment. Powered by the same large language model technology underlying OpenAI's ChatGPT, Copilot is integrated directly into Windows 11 and into Microsoft 365 applications. Basic Copilot functionality is available at no additional charge in Windows 11, but Copilot Pro, a premium subscription tier, offers faster performance, priority access during high-demand periods, and deeper integration with Microsoft 365 applications, including real-time AI assistance in Word, Excel, and Outlook. For enterprise customers, Microsoft has introduced Copilot for Microsoft 365 as a separate, substantially priced add-on to existing Microsoft 365 business subscriptions. The enterprise pricing reflects the commercial reality that AI infrastructure is expensive to build and operate, and that Microsoft intends to recover those costs through premium service tiers rather than baseline licensing. Xbox Game Pass, while not a Windows feature in the strictest sense, is part of the Microsoft ecosystem that users increasingly encounter through Windows 11's integrated Xbox application. Game Pass Ultimate offers access to a rotating library of games for a monthly subscription fee. The gaming experience on Windows 11 is increasingly designed around this subscription model, rather than individual game purchases. The account requirement matters in this context, not because it directly constitutes a subscription, but because a Microsoft account is the gateway through which Microsoft can offer, encourage, and eventually require its paid services. The concern among users is not irrational, and dismissing it as technophobia or resistance to change misrepresents what is actually being observed and felt. Subscription fatigue is a documented and commercially significant phenomenon. The average household in developed markets now manages subscriptions for streaming video, streaming music, cloud storage, software applications, news publications, gaming services, and various productivity tools. Each individual subscription may be affordable in isolation. The cumulative monthly cost of maintaining a full portfolio of digital subscriptions has become a meaningful household expense for many families. The prospect of an operating system joining that list, even partially, even optionally, lands on users who are already experiencing the psychological and financial weight of recurring digital payments. Cloud dependency is a related concern that carries both practical and philosophical dimensions. When critical documents, photographs, and professional files are stored primarily in cloud services, the continued accessibility of those files depends on the continued payment of the subscription fee and the continued operation of the cloud service. Users who have lived through the discontinuation of cloud services, products that were once staples and were then quietly shut down, understand that cloud storage is not the same as personal ownership. The files exist on someone else's infrastructure, and access to them is contingent on a commercial relationship remaining intact. The AI premium feature question is perhaps the most forward-looking concern. Microsoft is investing enormous resources in AI development, and it is recovering those investments through premium service tiers. As AI capabilities become more central to the Windows experience, and Microsoft's direction strongly suggests they will, The question of which AI features remain free and which require payment becomes increasingly significant. The online account requirement concern reflects a broader anxiety about the direction of personal computing. Users who prefer local accounts do so for a variety of legitimate reasons: privacy preferences, institutional requirements, unreliable internet connectivity, or simply a philosophical preference for computing that does not depend on a corporate account remaining in good standing. The steady erosion of straightforward access to local account setup is experienced by these users as a reduction in the autonomy they previously exercised over their own hardware. Future monetization anxiety is perhaps the hardest category to address with precision, precisely because it concerns decisions that have not yet been made. But the pattern of behavior, services being layered onto Windows, premium tiers being introduced, free features being enhanced versions of paid products, creates a reasonable basis for users to wonder where this trajectory leads. Technology companies have demonstrated repeatedly that business models evolve, and that what is free today carries no guarantee of remaining free tomorrow. The concern is not paranoia. It is pattern recognition. It is equally important to be clear about what is not happening. Microsoft has not announced a subscription requirement for Windows itself. The company's public communications consistently describe Windows 11C as a platform that users own through their device purchase or standalone license. The concerns outlined above are grounded in observed trends and reasonable extrapolation, not in confirmed future plans. That distinction matters for intellectual honesty, even as the trends themselves deserve serious examination. Microsoft's evolution from a software company into a cloud and services company is one of the most significant corporate transformations in the technology industry's recent history, and understanding it is essential to understanding the Windows question. When Satya Nadella became Microsoft's chief executive in 2014, the company was in a complicated position. Windows was still dominant, but increasingly irrelevant to the fastest-growing areas of computing: mobile, cloud, and services. Microsoft's mobile strategy had failed. Its relationship with developers was strained. The internal culture, by multiple accounts, was resistant to change. Nadella's response was a fundamental repositioning of Microsoft's identity and business model. The company's mission became empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. The means of doing so shifted from selling perpetual software licenses to providing cloud infrastructure, software as a service, and increasingly, AI capabilities. Azure became one of the most significant cloud computing platforms in the world. Microsoft 365 grew into a subscription service with hundreds of millions of users. The commercial success of this transformation has been extraordinary. Microsoft's market capitalization grew by an order of magnitude during this period. The subscription model that underpins this transformation has specific advantages that Microsoft and its investors find compelling. Recurring revenue is more predictable than one-time license sales. It enables continuous product improvement rather than the compressed development cycles of major version releases. It creates deeper, more persistent relationships between the company and its customers. It aligns the company's incentives, maintaining a service that customers find valuable enough to continue paying for, with the customer's interests in a way that a one-time purchase does not. These are genuine arguments with genuine merit. The alternative to subscription-funded development is not necessarily a better product delivered for free. It is a product that must generate sufficient revenue from occasional major releases to fund a development team, which creates pressure to ship major versions on commercial timelines rather than user readiness timelines. The history of Windows versions that launched in poor condition and required years of updates to reach their potential is partly a history of that pressure. Microsoft's investment in AI is the most capital-intensive commitment the company has made in years. Training large language models, building and maintaining the infrastructure to serve them at scale, and integrating them meaningfully into products requires substantial ongoing investment. Recovering that investment through premium service tiers is a commercially rational approach, even if users experience it as feature fragmentation or access restriction. The competitive landscape also shapes Microsoft's strategy. Google offers cloud-based productivity tools, AI assistants, and a cloud-first operating system. Apple offers a tightly integrated hardware and software ecosystem with its own AI features. Amazon dominates cloud infrastructure. In each of these competitive dimensions, Microsoft's response has involved deepening its subscription and services portfolio, because subscription revenue provides the financial resources to compete at the frontier of AI and cloud development. From Microsoft's perspective, the company is building a more continuously valuable Windows platform, one that receives regular improvements, AI enhancements, and security updates, rather than delivering a static product and leaving users to use aging software until the next major release. Whether that framing resonates depends significantly on whether users experience the ongoing payments as commensurate with the ongoing value they receive. Projecting the future of Windows requires acknowledging the limits of what can be known while taking seriously the directional signals that current trends provide. One plausible trajectory is the continued bifurcation of the Windows experience into a functional free tier and an AI-powered premium tier. In this scenario, Windows itself remains a perpetual license product, sufficient for basic computing tasks, but increasingly modest in its AI capabilities compared to what subscribers receive. The free experience works. The premium experience is meaningfully better. Over time, as AI becomes more central to productivity, the practical pressure to subscribe grows, even for users who began with no intention of paying. A second trajectory involves the enterprise and consumer markets diverging more significantly than they have previously. Enterprise customers, accustomed to volume licensing agreements and already paying substantial subscription fees for Microsoft 365, may transition to a fully subscription-based Windows model without significant disruption. Consumer markets, more price-sensitive and more resistant to recurring costs, may retain a perpetual license option for longer. This kind of market segmentation is common in enterprise software and would allow Microsoft to capture subscription revenue from its most lucrative customers while avoiding consumer backlash. A third possibility is that competitive pressure from alternative operating systems, from regulatory scrutiny, from consumer advocacy, constrains how aggressively Microsoft can monetize the Windows platform. European regulators have demonstrated willingness to impose significant requirements on large technology platforms. Consumer resistance to subscription models, if it manifests in device purchasing decisions that favor competitors, creates its own market-based constraint. The AI native operating system question represents the most speculative but potentially most consequential variable. If the fundamental interaction model of personal computing shifts from file management and application launching to natural language conversation with an intelligent system, the boundaries of what constitutes the operating system and what constitutes a paid AI service become extremely difficult to draw. An operating system that understands context, anticipates needs, and generates content in response to conversational requests is both a utility and a service, and pricing it as either or as both will be one of the defining commercial questions of the coming decade. Software ownership as a concept may itself evolve. The generation of users now entering the consumer market has grown up with streaming services, subscription gaming, and cloud-based everything. The philosophical attachment to owning software, as distinct from accessing it, may be less pronounced in that generation than in those who experienced the transition from ownership to service. What users accept and what they resist will shape what Microsoft can offer and what it must provide for free to remain competitive. Windows began as a product you could hold in your hands. A box on a shelf, a set of disks, a license key printed on a card and tucked into a paper sleeve. It was yours. You brought it home, you installed it, and it belonged to your machine in a way that felt permanent and unconditional. That version of Windows, that relationship between a user and their software, has not disappeared entirely. You can still purchase a Windows license outright. The operating system still installs on your hardware and runs without a subscription. These facts are real and they matter. But the world around that license has changed profoundly and continues to change. The services layered onto Windows, the AI capabilities being developed and monetized, the cloud dependencies being normalized, the account integrations being deepened, all of these are reshaping the experience of using Windows in ways that the license fee alone no longer captures. Microsoft's direction is not difficult to read. The company that generated the majority of its revenue from software licenses has become a company that generates the majority of its revenue from cloud services and subscriptions. Windows is the foundation of that strategy, not as a product to be sold once, but as a platform that secures an ongoing relationship with hundreds of millions of users. Whether that relationship is experienced as value or as obligation depends on what Microsoft delivers, how it prices what it delivers, and how much genuine choice users retain in deciding what they pay for. The question users face is not only whether Windows is changing, it is whether the change serves them, and what they are prepared to do if it does not. Because the future of Windows will be written not only in Microsoft's product roadmaps and investor presentations, it will be written in the choices that hundreds of millions of users make about what they accept, what they resist, and what they decide they are willing to pay for. And perhaps the most important question of the coming decade is not which features will cost money. It is whether the computer sitting on your desk will still feel like something you own, or simply something you are renting 1 month at a time.